so close.
They already asked.
This is recording, right?
Yes.
So I can't use the F-bomb?
If you say it that way, that's fine.
This tool has not been experimentally validated. It is something that I've been playing with for a number of years, off and on, informally, and I'll share these ideas with you. For severe and persistent challenging behavior, we want you to help the caregiver get access to a licensed behavior analyst here in Arizona. For those of you who are not in Arizona, a board-certified behavior analyst. Here's where you can find a licensed behavior analyst at the psych board. And by the way, all of this stuff is up on the website, right? If you haven't already, you can download this handout. So we're going to start with what is the evidence, and then we're going to move quickly into the caregiver assessment tool. We're going to move very quickly throughout this, and there will be some participation, although you won't be recorded, just Jamie and I. So in general, what we know is that challenging behavior in the home can change. There's been decades now of practice, from general parent training programs to individualized specific training specific programs that involve a functional behavioral assessment of the child, in-home services, people qualified and trained and teaching alternative skills, and coaching the parents and foster parents, all that sort of stuff. We just pulled a handful of slides here. Our goal was to kind of not give you a whole list, but to kind of fill the page. So the family checkup model is the parent-child interaction therapy, behavioral parent training. Those are more general kind of approaches. At the bottom here, you have two, but there are tons more. These are examples of successful interventions where an individual assessment has been done with the child. A functional behavioral assessment has done. The behavior plan is designed to fit that child. People go into the home, they work with the parents, they train the parents, they coach, they back off, and they modify the plan. Not everybody has that luxury. But what we want you to know with this slide is that we know that child behavior can change, okay? That most successful programs that do include child behavior change include two things. We want to reinforce behaviors that we do value, and we don't want to continue to reinforce the behaviors that are challenging, that are problematic. Most parent training programs have other pieces to them. They have timeout pieces, they have error correction procedures, they have a number of other procedures. But at the very least, most successful behavior change programs have these two elements to it. If we find something that's reinforcing the behavior, we don't want to continue to do that. Instead, we want to reinforce the behaviors we value. Does that make sense? Okay. The number of parents who seek help for children's challenging behaviors is much larger than the availability of qualified professionals. I didn't find any online articles for this, but I can tell you that for the past 3 years I've been asking Raising Special Kids, how many calls do you get from every year regarding behavior concerns? And you can see, about 2,700 3 years ago, 1,600 2 years ago, almost 3,000 calls last year. Were concerns that parents were calling concerning about their child's behavior. Not necessarily all were behavior problems at home. Sometimes they were concerns about how the child was behaving at school, how the school was responding to the child's behavior, etc. Right? But there's a lot. We don't have a lot of licensed behavior analysts in Arizona. We're growing them, but child behavior change starts with adult behavior change. Did you know that? We don't just write a prescription and say, go forth and behave. Stop crawling under the table and tantruming every time I ask you to put your stuff away. If that worked, I'd be rich. No, it starts with adult behavior change. And that's part of the problem. It's hard to change adult behavior, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a foster parent, a group home staff. It's hard to change our behavior. We've been doing this for a long time, some of us longer than others. And to sustain those changes, to make those changes required to in turn help the child change his behavior, and then to sustain those changes over time really is difficult. But it is the focus of treatment integrity, fidelity, adherence. Those terms are used. There's a distinction between all of them, but I'm not going to go into that because I can't remember right now. But that fidelity relates to, we have an intervention. We've created a behavior intervention. When the child does this, we adults will do this. When the child does this, we adults will do this. Before the child does this, we adults will do this, right? So that's a prescription for the grown-ups. But to sustain those changes has been difficult, and we've started to realize that in the past couple of decades, and we started to focus attention on treatment integrity. It wasn't that long ago when we weren't concerned about that. We would say, hey, we wrote a good behavior plan. I don't know why they won't implement it, you know? I could plaster the walls in my office with all the good behavior plans I wrote that nobody ever implemented. Right? So treatment integrity is really, really important. In this last reference in here, Swanger, Gagne, et al., it's a neat article, and they describe a number of factors, strategies for maximizing home intervention implementation integrity. And I'm just going to run through a general list here. Follow a partnership model during intervention development phase. Provide a rationale for collecting integrity data. Integrity data is fidelity data. It's how well did you carry out the plan. Script and package the intervention. So make it very, very, very objective, very clear, very stepwise. Train and educate family members on intervention delivery with various techniques. Consider culturally sensitive procedures. Focus on strategies that build trust between families and educators. Enhance communication between consultant and families. Implement family-centered approaches throughout the consultation process. Gather information about home settings and family systems. Facilitate regular contact and provide collective support. Adjust integrity data collection to improve ease of data collection. It's a long list. We're getting better at coming up with ways to help improve treatment fidelity. But one reason for poor treatment integrity may be related to coercion. Coercion has been talked about for a long time. This is an early article. In Don's presentation earlier, he mentioned Murray Sidman, the father of coercion and its fallouts. Not that he advocates for coercion, but he advocates for alternatives to coercion. So it's been written about, it's been talked about for quite a while. The Lucashin article, the second article there, actually makes a strong recommendation that our assessments, our behavioral assessments of the child also include assessments of the coercive interactions, okay? The other three articles, starting with Sloman et al. In 2005, Sloman created this way of collecting data about child behavior problem, parent reprimands, followed by child behavior problems, okay? And what we found, or what they found, is that child behavior problems are very, very frequent before the reprimand. And after the reprimand, they go away for a while. And he wondered, is that why we have so many reprimands? That when I reprimand my child and the behavior stops for a moment, that's reinforcing for me. That's part of coercion theory. That's what we will talk about that more later. I'll give more examples later. The next study after that, the one on top, Addison and Lerman, this is really fascinating. They used the same data collection procedure, but what they did is they trained teachers, 5 days worth of training on good behavior management practices, including ignoring problem behavior, reinforcing preferred behavior, okay, not giving a child what he wants when he's tantruming and demanding it, not giving a child your reprimands when he's demanding your attention, not allowing a child to escape from a demand when he's having a problem behavior. These general guidelines for behavior management, 5 days of training. Then they put the teachers with a couple of kids, one with some behavior problems, one typical peer, and said, just do what you think is best. What do you think they did? They fell into the coercion patterns. They reprimanded when they were taught for the last 5 days not to reprimand. They gave the child what they wanted when they were taught not to do that. This is powerful stuff. Training of professionals to do something different by itself wasn't enough. The coercion factor could be playing a difference. The next study after that was the Miller-Lerman study, and that's where they actually manipulated something. The first two studies were just observation. The third study was actually manipulation. So they had one person acting, role-playing, like he was a student with challenging behavior, another person role-playing that, and they switched back and forth, and sometimes that person would stop their behavior after getting a reprimand, and sometimes that person would not stop their behavior after getting a reprimand. And so they actually manipulated the data, and they saw, sure enough, when they stop the behavior, the reprimands are continue or are worse. When they don't stop the behavior, the reprimands are not so great. So all this to say, we have a lot of information about we have a growing body of information about treatment integrity, treatment fidelity. We have a growing body of information about coercion, but very rarely are they coming together. I'm not seeing them overlap. One approach to treatment integrity is by involving families in the process of, in a way that ensures goodness of fit or contextual fit, and that's a lot of that involves the list that I read from earlier. But another way, Jamie knows more about this than I do.
I'll talk more at the end about this, but motivational interviewing is an approach that actually started back in 1983, and there have been decades of research done on this. It was started with problem drinkers, found to be very, very effective as a way of, before treatment starts, before you begin an intervention, you first help that individual or the parent explore their feelings, their ambivalent feelings about motivation to actually follow through on what you as the collaborator are discussing with them. So there's been quite a bit of study since 1983 on addictions. Then it spread to the area of managing chronic medical conditions, looking at disease management. It spread to probation. And more recently, Dan mentioned the family checkup earlier. That is combining looking at challenging behavior in the home and helping parents to actually make the changes that are discussed with the individual that's helping them. And there's been evidence now showing that that's effective. So one of the things that we are encouraging you to think about is Dan is going to spend quite a bit of time talking about a tool to help those of us that are not behavior experts to provide support for families. But one of the things we need to really be careful about doing is not just handing the tool out, not just assuming the knowledge will be enough, but helping the family to take a look at what the challenges are for implementing that, and helping the family, guiding them towards being motivated to take steps.
And you'll talk more about that later, right? Thank you. So, the caregiver assessment tool is our current attempt to use the best available evidence in a way that helps you understand the coercion cycle happening between parent and child, helps to infer the possible reinforcement for challenging behaviors from that coercion cycle, guides you to develop strategies that prevent and reduce child challenging behavior, and guides you to develop strategies that also meet parent caregiver needs. And that's a big promise, but it's not a promise. It's a tool, and we're basically testing it out on you, okay? So let me get started. Here's a typical problem. You and when I say caregiver, think of parent, foster parent, group home staff, teacher, paraprofessional, anybody in a role that supports another person, okay? Anybody in a role who has some influence on helping that other person change their behavior, okay? So caregiver, it doesn't mean any particular status or level in terms of service provider or anything like that. That's the person. So the caregiver prompts the child to end video time. The child bites, pinches, and kicks, and the caregiver, as a result, he gets extended video time. How many of you have ever seen something like that happen? Another example. You prompt the child to work by herself. She cries and throws the book. The teacher approaches to help. Anybody familiar with that example? Another example. You're helping somebody take a shower who needs some help washing himself. He screams and bites his hand. It's really getting ugly, so you cut the shower short. You know about that, huh? A peer is insulted by another peer, so the first peer threatens to kill him. The other peer backs down. You, caregivers, had nothing to do with this. This is just happening between peers, right? So just to fuel the pump a little bit, can you think of your own examples? Think of what happens before, what is the behavior, what happens after. Anybody? Yes?
I have somebody that will take hot stuff off the stove and burn their hand, and then they don't have to go to school.
Seriously. So it's time to go to school. He takes something hot off the stove, burns his hand, so he doesn't have to go to school. Wow. Nothing says, I don't want to go to school, like burning my hand. Any other examples? Thanks, Brian. Yes? Suicide threats. So what's the antecedent? What happens just before? Okay. Some expectation of a non-preferred. Okay. And then the behavior is threatening suicide verbally or? Usually. Okay. And then the consequence?
Usually crisis gets called and they get to go to the hospital and kind of fly to the hospital, or they get to spend time in the hospital and just go to the ward.
Do they get that remote on the bedside for the TV? Yeah. My son liked that. Thank you. Any other examples? Yes?
Non-preferred food is presented at dinner. Child tantrums for an hour and a half. Time to go to bed. The dinner's over.
Oh, wow, that's a long tantrum. That child gets the persistence award. Thank you very much. So we're going to take a minute. Now, you all have a caregiver assessment tool in front of you. We're going to give you like 1 or 2 minutes to have you practice filling out this assessment tool. Don't worry, scribble all over it. You can go online and download as many other copies of it as you want, okay? But take a minute, and what you're doing is you're going to answer question C and question D. C, what are the most challenging routines I face with my child? Now, it doesn't have to be your child, but if you support somebody, if you're a therapist, if you're a special educator, if you are in that sort of caregiver role, think about, the person you support. If you're not in that role directly, but you indirectly support a family or a foster family, or you're in a consultant role or somebody, you're a provider and a therapist in the home, and it's not your child, but it's a child that you work with, okay? Pick somebody who you know well enough that you might be able to fill in some of these. And trust me, you won't get graded on it. You don't have to have all the correct answers. We want you to just practice using the tool before the end of the session, okay? So, what are the most challenging routines? Think mealtime, baths, going to bed, having to go to school, those kinds of things. That's what we mean by routines. Okay. And moving right along, write down 1 or 2 challenging behaviors that happen within those routines, like hitting, kicking, spitting, crying, running away. Try to be specific about the behavior. Don't say bad attitude. Don't say angry. Try to get specific. What is it that the child does? In the sake of time, I'm going to move on, but that doesn't stop you from writing a dissertation on these things if you want, okay? We're going to use one example and keep going, and hopefully that you'll be able to think about the focus person that you're writing about, okay? But I don't know all of those, so we're just going to give you one example. So the problem behavior is hitting and kicking. The antecedent is putting your things away, and the consequence is mom says, fine, I'll do it myself, okay? So prompted to put things away, he hits and kicks, and he escapes from that demand, okay? That's the problem. The problem has a pattern to it. This is the good news. There's an antecedent, there's a behavior, there's a consequence. That's the good news. This is the problem behavior trajectory. Keep in mind that middle line, okay? In order to change that trajectory, we need to have a clear and manageable goal of what it is we want the child to do instead. What do you think that might be in this situation? Right. Put your things away, right? Follow the directions. So, this antecedent, put your things away, instead of hitting and kicking, we want the child to put things away, and we want to then provide some reward, some reinforcer for doing that. If we can do that often enough and reinforce those preferred behaviors, then we won't have so many problem behaviors to deal with. Does that make sense? The solution also has a pattern. It's just like the problem. There's an antecedent, there's a consequence, there's a behavior. So, now go back to your caregiver assessment and fill in A and B. Think about that focus person of yours, and think about what are some of the preferred behaviors that person does well that you would like to encourage more of. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the exact right pivotal behavior for that person. Just a couple of ideas of what does this person do that you could reinforce and make happen more often. And B, what are some of the child's favorite things or activities or food or people? Does he like being tickled? Does he like being squeezed? Does he like sitting with the parents? Does he like being chased? Does he like watching SpongeBob? Does he like swinging? Does he like video games? Does he like bike rides? Okay? So just jot a couple of those things down. Does anybody have any questions about these instructions? Does it make sense? All right, then I'm going to move along. So if this is our solution, we just simply get the child to put things away instead of hitting and kicking. If that's our solution, why is it so hard? Because it's rarely this simple. Problem behaviors are often a series of many precursor behaviors. What looks like this, put your things away, hits and kicks, fine, I'll do it myself, usually is something like this. Put your things away, no response from the child. So the instruction is repeated, and then there's a whine. The instruction is repeated again, and then there's a cry. And then the instruction is repeated again, and then there's a hit and kick, and after that it's fine, I'll do it myself, okay? And sometimes it's kind of it sneaks up on us. Sometimes we don't recognize those earlier precursor behaviors. But if we could, and we recognize those, we could intervene sooner, and we might be able to avoid this altogether. To achieve this goal of helping him put his things away requires us to change our behavior, okay? This is where one of us has to be the grown-up, comes in to play. I've said that to my kids many times. Sometimes, even when it wasn't too late. Most of the time, it was too late. It's like, I'm sorry. One of us should have been the grown-up in that situation. But, so, think about that scenario I just went through, all the cycle of precursor behaviors. So we need to try something different, right? We start by saying, put your things away. There's no response. So then we may try something different and point to the items to put away. And this time, he whines. So then we model it for the child. We show him how to put things away. That still doesn't work. He cries. So then we stumble upon the idea of handing it to him, and he takes it from me, and he puts it over where it belongs, okay? And wow, fourth try worked. It shouldn't have to be that hard, but the point is, even when we're not trained, we sometimes stumble upon a nice alternative solution, okay? But it still requires that we're the ones that change our behavior before we can get that success. Does that make sense? You with me on this? So, now go back to your caregiver assessment tool and go down to letter H. What preferred behaviors, see A above, could I help the child do more often throughout each day and before the challenging behaviors occur? So in this box, you'll list those preferred behaviors that you put in. Was it A? Okay. And in this box, you'll put in some of those reward ideas that you put in B, those preferred activities and preferences and favorite things of the child. You're already starting to fill out a behavior plan. Okay? Does this make sense? So scribble it down, take a minute. How are we doing on time? And the purpose of this is that we want to reinforce or strengthen the behaviors that we value in order to prevent the challenging behaviors. We want that child to experience a lot more of, oh, Dad likes it when I do this, rather than Dad chases after me every time I, kick the cat or whatever. Okay, so now we're going to get on to the next step. But there are times when my prompts are unsuccessful, no matter what I try. I hand it to him, that doesn't work. I model it for him, that doesn't work. And I need to find something else. And sometimes I'm not always successful at getting that preferred behavior. Also, even if I was always successful at having my child follow my instructions, I'm not necessarily teaching my child how to get his own needs met. So, if my child followed my instructions all the way up until college, but never learned to say, I don't want to do that now, I'd rather do this instead, is that okay with you? Then he might not be ready for college. We want to come up with interventions that not only help you, the caregiver, the parents, the therapist, but also help the child get his needs met. And this is replacement behaviors. One of the slides I showed you about some of the evidence was teaching functional communication training, okay? How many of you have heard of functional communication training, FCT? Replacement behaviors, functional communication training, it's the same thing. But here's our backup goal. When I want the child to put his things away, but I'm unsuccessful at making that happen, could I give him another way to get the same consequence for the problem behavior? Remember, the problem behavior was fine, I'll do it myself, and he escapes the demands of the task. Is there another way? Is there another skill I could teach him to ask me in a certain way? Ask me nicely, and of course, I'll let you postpone that task for a while. That's what we mean by replacement behaviors. And I'll give you a couple more examples. Replacement behaviors should be, or functionally equivalent replacement behaviors should serve the same function. So if you have a child who loves to be chased and tickled and all that sort of stuff, and you do that as part of your reward for those preferred behaviors, that's great. But if the problem behavior has been escaping from the demands of having to go to bed, and he's able to stay up later and later and later and never go to bed until he just passes out at 1 in the morning, then the goal of all of those other problem behaviors is to postpone that bed. Doesn't matter whether you chase him and have fun with him and tickle him, that doesn't meet his needs. In this earlier case, put things away, we would have some sort of reward for putting those things away. But that doesn't meet his need of avoiding the task. What he wants is to avoid the task. Can we give him another way? Replacement behaviors should be equally or more effective than problem behavior. They should be equally or more efficient than problem behavior. And they should be recognized by people with no training at all. So instead of our goal being to surround this person with a bubble of well-informed, well-meaning caregivers who always know what he wants. When he behaves this way, oh, that means he's tired. When he behaves this way, oh, that means she's hungry. No, 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 no. Our goal should be to put the power into the person to ask for what they want, but in a way that everyone can notice. And ideally, it's something that you can make happen if needed. So if in the middle of a tantrum, you expect the child to ask for a break, and that child is just so upset and they're not asking for a break, if you had been teaching that child to use a break card and ask for a break, and you have a break card in your pocket, you can carry the card up to him, touch it to his hand, and say, oh, thanks for asking, and you can end that tantrum and get away, not because he was having a tantrum, but because he asked for the break. Okay? Now, here's a couple of other examples. Told to stop using the computer. He hits and pushes and kicks. He keeps more time on the computer. What do we want him to do? We want him to stop playing and to walk away from the computer. What does he get for that? A big fat thank you. Now, maybe he gets other nice things. Maybe he gets a number of things that he really likes, and they have been things that have been valuable in reinforcing his other behavior. But what he wants in the moment is to keep more time on the computer. So that big fat thank you and those other things are not going to be able to compete with what he wants in the moment right now. So instead, can we teach him to ask for 2 more minutes on the computer? In most cases, we can find a way. And when I say ask, I mean use whatever communication system that person is most effective with. If they know sign better than anything else, then use sign. If you use a card, use a visual, use words, but use something that that person can be successful at, and you can be successful prompting. Here's a person reminded to take a bath, so he runs away. You chase and catch him and bring him back. What do you want him to do? Take a bath. Go to the bathroom, get undressed, start that whole bath routine. What does he get when he goes and does that? A big, fat thank you. What does he want? He wants you to chase him and catch him and bring him back, and he wants all that commotion that's not going to happen in the bathroom, unless you can find another way to make that happen. But the point is, a replacement behavior is different from the preferred behavior we want up above. A replacement behavior actually can help him meet the same need as the problem behavior. It's functionally equivalent. Is this starting to make sense? Told to put candy back in the grocery store. He cries, kicks, and screams. He keeps the candy bar. Anybody ever see that scenario? Not that you have been a part of that at all. I certainly haven't. What do we want him to do? We want him to put the candy back. What does he get? Thank you. Exactly. If he wants the candy, and a thank you is not going to work, this is teaching him to ask for the candy in a certain way. Now, this wouldn't be your only intervention. Obviously, if this has happened before, you make a plan, right? If the parents are saying, I can never take my child shopping, it's just ridiculous, you say, I'm sorry. I know that that's really hard. You probably can't take your child shopping if you were to go right now, but what could help you be successful? Let's make a plan. How can you help prepare him for what are the rules, what are the expected behaviors? Could you go in for a short time, pick out one thing, come back out? Could you teach him to ask for certain items? Could he have a choice of 3 different kinds of candy or 3 different kinds of treats, and teach him how to ask you? Of course you could. You make a plan, right? This is only a part of that plan. This is not the solution in itself. I'm just trying to make a point. Replacement behaviors are functionally different than other preferred behaviors that we try to teach. We want to teach them both. Because the more kids use both of those behaviors, the more options they have, the fewer problem behaviors they need to use. Brother teases sister. Brother teases her, so she pulls his hair and bites him. Brother leaves her alone. What do we want the sister to do? We want her to tell him to stop. If she tells him to stop, what happens? A lot of times the teasing continues. What would be a replacement behavior? Come tell an adult who can get the brother to leave her alone. Right? Sounds like a simple solution. This is really at the heart of good bully prevention strategies in schools. It's teaching all people involved, the victims, the bullies themselves, the bystanders, and the staff. A stop, walk, and talk process. But it requires that the adults have to be trusted to follow through. If I come and tell you, you better make this right. If I don't want this bully to know who told you, you better respect my anonymity. You better do something to make him stop if you expect me to come and tell you, right? So these replacement behaviors have to actually work. They can't be come and ask me and you don't listen. You continue to talk on the phone. Ask to set the table. He tips chairs and breaks glass. So he's sent to his room and he escapes setting the table. What do we want him to do? Set the table. What does he get? No escape from the task. So what would be a good replacement behavior? Ask for help or a pass. Help me set the table so I can get it done faster? Or can I have a pass on this so I don't have to do it right now? I'll do it tomorrow night, not tonight. I'll do it next meal, okay? Is this making sense, the difference between replacement behaviors and other preferred behaviors? What questions do you have about this? Yes?
The challenge sometimes becomes the replacement behavior becomes the target behavior because every time it's how can I negotiate to not have this.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's true. What most of us fear is that, well, we can't let this go on forever. We can't always give him 2 more minutes on the computer. We can't always give her the candy. We can't always give him what he wants. Don't worry about that. If that's going to happen, just take data. Count. How many times is the replacement behavior happening? Is it happening more and more and more? Is it successfully preventing problem behaviors from happening? If the problem behaviors are going down and the replacement behaviors are going up, at first that's a good thing. Eventually it becomes unmanageable. But we can come up with a plan for that. We can teach a delay. We can teach a discrimination between now when you ask. During this routine, when you ask, you can have another 2 minutes, or you can have, but during this routine, you can't. Before we go into the grocery store, I'll let you know if asking for a piece of candy is actually, if I have the money to buy you candy. And other times I'll tell you, I don't have the money, okay? And kids are good at learning that discrimination if we help them with that discrimination. A really good strategy is, great, I hear you asking for help. I'll be right there. And then you finish up on the phone, you finish changing the baby's diapers, and then you come over and you take care of your child. And you're so wonderful that he asked the way he did. But it's the asking you acknowledged right away. You didn't give him the help right away, but you acknowledged it right away. And so you can build in more and more delays that way. So yeah, it's a very real problem, but it's not an unmanageable problem. Yes?
Is it okay to practice this before it's actually time to set the table?
Yes.
And then it's a 2-part question, actually. If they're already tipping chairs, how do I teach them to ask in that capacity, or what do I do then if it's already started to happen?
So if the behavior's already started, I really can't answer. How do you handle the behavior once it started? But there are plenty of times where, this is a question for the family, for the parents. What can you handle? This replacement behavior stuff wouldn't even be necessary many times if caregivers could just follow an extinction schedule. And if they could sit back and calmly stay calm while the tantrum gets worse and worse and worse, and the kid kicks and screams and cries, and 20 minutes goes by, and they don't, it's no big deal. And then eventually the child quiets down and calms down on their own, and then you go in and you say, now, let's finish what we were doing, and then let's talk about it, okay? But many parents can't do that. They've taught, they know, I should ignore this, but I can't. Or I ignored it for 10 minutes and I couldn't do it anymore, okay? We're talking about parents, in the purpose of this, we're talking about parents who don't have the resources of a behavior analyst to be able to support them through this process. We're talking about meeting parents where they are. And if where they are is, I often do things to stop the behavior, and I'm successful at doing that at least half of the time, then like child behavior change, we should start with adult behavior change where they are. If they are capable of backing off and letting him have his little fit and handling that without anybody getting hurt, then great. But if they're not capable of doing that, that's when I recommend we have a replacement behavior that we can make happen. That's why I like the physical card or touch my hand. You do that a lot. Touch my hand if you want a break, you know, something like that, so you can help somebody who's in no state to make a logical, rational decision right now, but you can help them be successful. Touch my hand if you need a break. Oh, there you go, thanks. Yeah, we can do this later. That's what I recommend as a strategy, but that's not something that's easy to learn. But if you start with a replacement behavior that you can control, that the grown-up can control, it's easier than if you start with something like, use your words and tell me calmly, you know. Yeah, and then you'll get a big fat thank you. There are issues with replacement behaviors. There are problems with it, but in general, I find that many behavior plans do not include replacement behaviors. They include the preferred behaviors. We want him to do this instead of this, but they don't include how can he get his needs met in that moment in a way that would be acceptable for all, and we could avoid a big, long extinction burst. So now this is going to take a while. There's 3 questions here. And I would like some question and answer so I can help you through this. E, what do I do to stop the challenging behavior once they start? Again, this is a tool for those situations where you know the caregiver is successful at least about half of the time stopping that behavior once it starts. So what is it that he does? What is it that she does? What is it that the staff in that group home do? They back off of the schedule. They tell the person he doesn't have to do it. Whatever. So just take a minute and write that one. Raise your hand if you have something written down or something that you have some idea. Okay. Another minute on this. What does the parent do? What does the caregiver do in the moment? Do they reprimand? Do they back off of their demands? Do they say, there, you don't have to? Do they say, you better, or knock it off, or else? Do they, what? Okay. Would anybody like to volunteer an answer? Yes?
This is based on some folks I was working with a while back, and they threatened their son. Then they tried to encourage him, and when neither worked and he kept on building and was hurting them, they went and locked himself in the garage.
Okay. So they threatened, and when that didn't work, then they, what was the middle part?
Tried to encourage him, comfort him.
Okay, comforted.
And about that time, he'd smack them, and then they would run and lock themselves in the
Then
garage.
they go in the garage, okay. And then would the behavior stop when they locked themselves away?
Yeah, then he'd get busy on his devices and his iPhone and TV and video games.
So it was about interrupting his preferred activities. Okay. Yes?
I had a family that when the child would be tantrum or refusing to do something, the mother would run get a picture of Chuckie
Chuckie.
and would show
Yeah.
Chuckie.
Yeah. No, wait. Let's make sure. Is it Chuckie the horror doll?
Yeah.
No. I was thinking Chuck E. Cheese. Oh.
Sorry, Chuckie the horror doll.
Wow. Okay. Hey, whatever works, right?
And it worked.
It worked temporarily.
No, it was to frighten her.
Okay. Any other examples? Yes, Becky. Just 2 bites. Okay. So there's negotiation there. Yeah. Perfect examples. Okay. Now, from that, go down to letter F. Sometimes our responses that make challenging behavior stop in the moment might unintentionally reinforce those very behaviors. In other words, if he gets what he wants, there's no need to continue the behavior. So it stops briefly, but it becomes more likely to happen again later. If this is true, then what is it about my action above, that negotiation, or the locking myself in the garage, or showing the picture of Chuckie? What is it about that might be the most reinforcing to my child's behavior? He gets my attention, whether it's a scolding or repeated instruction or threats or comfort, or she gets some preferred activity like a bike ride, more computer time, food. He avoids or escapes demands, getting out of chores, avoiding going to bed, avoiding getting dressed, avoiding going to school, avoiding taking a bath. Or she avoids or escapes people like her brothers or sisters or peers or adults or crowds. So think about what you wrote for E and just take a guess at what might the reinforcing, how could that be reinforcing the problem behavior? Does he get something? Does he avoid or escape something? And finally, with G, how could the child ask for the very same thing or something similar? Okay? So if the child is getting negotiations because of the problem behavior, and the parents negotiate, is there another way to ask for that negotiation that won't encourage the problem behavior? If we could teach there's one way, you're getting one choice card per meal, okay? And you can be careful how you use it, but you get one card per meal. And when you can hold up this card and you can say, I'd like to pass on the peas or whatever, careful how you use it. Then it might be one card per day, and then it might be one card per week. But once we establish a replacement behavior, we can worry about fading that later on. If the person is getting a lot of reprimands from the parents, is there another way to ask for some sort of attention? If the person is avoiding tasks, is there another way to ask for a break or a pass on that, or a do it later, or help?
I want to know about Chuckie.
Yeah, I want to know about Chuckie too. Is he, obviously
Well, actually, what ended up happening is the kids just could give a care about Chuckie's picture being pasted up.
right, yeah.
But in the beginning, it was very effective.
So eventually it didn't work. So at first they must have been scared of it. Maybe they saw the movie. Maybe they just saw the movie. Okay. Well, it's a classic. We should all see it. But so yeah. So what the question is there another way to scare your child? Clearly, in that situation, here's a problem with this whole premise. Right. Sometimes the things we do stop behavior in its tracks because reinforcement is delivered. But other times, it's because punishment happens. And I would guess that in that situation, it wasn't a reinforcer, but the behavior stopped out of fear of what might come next. So does this make sense to you? Anybody care to volunteer an example of what you put for G, a replacement behavior? Yes.
Well, I have to sort of pull on when I read. I don't work too much with kids. I read their notes a lot. And so this is a youth who threatens to really hurt people, drop a lot, et cetera. If in the process of making a move from one place to another, apparently to avoid peers, what happens is that the second staff person threatens him. And that kind of calms things down, so the boy could just ask, would you come to the meeting? Could somebody come
Okay.
to the meeting?
So he threatens serious harm. That brings about a second staff person. And as a replacement behavior, is there another way that he could simply ask for so-and-so to join us while we go to the cafeteria? Excellent. Perfect example. Thank you. Any other examples? Do you see how this is different, though? These replacement behaviors are clearly different from the preferred behaviors. And if we're going to avoid long, prolonged extinction bursts that parents or caregivers may not be able to handle, long tantrums, crying jags, fights, things getting thrown, broken, blah, 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 until the child learns that no reinforcement is going to happen whatsoever. If we can't guarantee that they can manage that, then teaching a replacement behavior is a good way to help cut that short and not require them to go through that. If their history, the family history or the parent history, the caregiver history is such that they frequently do something to bring the behavior to a stop, then chances are pretty good that they're not going to be successful at handling a long extinction burst. Does that make sense? So I want to talk about coercion and bring that in. So here's you'll see some common examples. Parent refuses to buy candy. This is bad news for the child. So the child tantrums in the store. This is bad news for the parent. So the parent gives in. This is good news for the child. This little bubble says R+. That means it's a positive reinforcer. The child got something in response to that tantrum. But then the child quiets down, which is good news for the parent. In this case, it's a negative reinforcer. The parent was able to stop something that they found aversive. How many of you find your children tantruming in a grocery store with you present aversive? I mean, they can do it all they want when I'm not there, but when I'm there, I don't like it. So the teacher corrects the student. This is bad news for the student. The student then yells and insults the teacher. This is bad news for the teacher because there's other students around, and now I can't let him get away with this. I've got to do something. Teacher then sends a student to the office. This is good news for the student because he's able to avoid the corrections of the teacher. He gets out of class, avoids the teacher. The yelling then stops. This is good news for the teacher because now she can continue to teach the rest of the kids who want to be here and not that troubled child. Okay? Do you see how this is affecting both people? Yeah, Krista.
Why is that R negative for the student instead of positive? Because he's escaping something?
Yes. One escapes the teacher, the student escapes the teacher, and the teacher escapes the student.
So negative means escape?
Yes. Think of the minus and the plus, not in terms of emotion. It's not positive, happy. It's positive in terms of addition. Okay? If you add something, if you gain something like attention or more time on the computer, that's positive reinforcement. It's addition. But if you lose something or avoid something, it's a subtraction. It's a minus sign. So the student loses the teacher's corrections, which is not a bad thing. But it is something that's lost, nevertheless. And the teacher loses the student, not as long as she would like to, but, for the moment. That's the difference between positive and negative. You don't need to we're not going to quiz you on this, but just, yeah, it is, this is how life works. This is how behaviors come to be. This is how certain behaviors are shaped over time and other behaviors are not. It's all about reinforcement. There's natural reinforcement that happens to all of us right now. I must have cracked about 3 jokes in here. If you guys hadn't chuckled or laughed or giggled a little bit, I wouldn't be even trying anymore, okay? Not that that's a bit of advice. I'm just saying. Okay, staff says, set the table. This is bad news for the person. The person starts breaking things. Bad news for the staff. Staff sends the person to the room. This is good news for the person because now he escaped the demands of setting the table. But it doesn't end there, does it? Now that the person is gone, this is good news for the staff because the breaking and the tantruming and all of that stuff is now gone too. This is what coercion is all about, okay? Nobody goes into this intentionally. When my wife and I were trying to have kids, we start talking about having kids, we didn't say, oh, let's have little ones so we can just, yell at them and scream and let them ruin our lives and things like that. No, nobody does that on purpose. We just fall into these patterns. It's a seductive, slippery slope. And yet, and we know about it. There's a lot of research about it. We know about it, but yet it doesn't seem to be permeating our field of treatment integrity like I think it should. I think that what we need is we need to consider the function of the adult behavior just as importantly, if not more importantly, than the function of the child behavior, because we don't write a script for the child to go forth and behave. We write a plan for the adult, and we say, can you do this? Can you hang in there? What would it take? How can we support you? Trust me, if you hang in there long enough, I really believe you're going to see some changes, right? But if it doesn't, we'll try something else. But if we don't meet that adult's needs to bring something to an immediate end, then we may continually have problems with treatment integrity. Not in all cases, but in many cases. So what we're advocating here is let's try. What happens if we start with the adult and say, let's and work backwards a little bit. So here's our example again. Put your things away, hits and kicks, fine, I'll do it myself. You've seen the first 3 boxes. But then the 4th box is the hitting and kicking stops. What's the coercion? Well, the child learning trial is, here's a demand. If I hit and kick, I can stop the demand, right? But then there's an adult learning trial too. The hitting and kicking is the antecedent for the adult to do something to bring it to a stop. Fine, I'll do it myself. And when it stops, thank God that's over with. Okay? So, now, go back to your caregiver assessment. You already filled these in, but I want you to revisit section F for just a moment and revisit what you wrote down or what you circled as the possible reinforcer for that parent behavior that you were thinking of, okay? And just see if you still, is it still what you think, or is it something else? Just take a minute. Is this clear? Is it making sense to you? Are the instructions clear? Because I could put them to song, if you like.
Yes, we'd like that.
Oh. What song? I should have had that prepared. All right, so let's just take a moment to break this coercion cycle, right? Put your things away, hits and kicks, followed by escape from hitting and kicking, for the child, followed by hitting and kicking stop, which is escape for the parent. The preferred behavior we want to see happen is when we help the child, we want the child to reach for the item and start putting them away, right? We learned earlier that if we can help the child by handing items to him. So that's our antecedent. We'll hand something to the child. Child reaches for the item. He takes the item and puts it away. And what does he get for as a consequence? He gets a big fat thank you and then another, here's another item. And here's another item. And here's another item, right? But if we're reinforcing enough, we can prevent the hitting and kicking from ever stopping, right? If we can make participation in putting things away, reinforcing for the child, that's wonderful. That should be our goal. But if we can't, then teaching a replacement behavior, can I do it later to result in the same, to prevent the hitting and kicking from starting? This is how we can break this coercion cycle. It breaks it for both the child and the parent. Does this make sense? It's our same diagram, it's just extended a little bit more.
Dan, I have a question. Do you ever see, I mean, it may not become an issue because then the behavior isn't there, but where there is this cycle of families just avoiding, they get into the cycle of using the reinforcement. I mean, it was brought up before, but where the like I'm thinking about behaviors that happen at school but not at home. And so where a family has just figured out how to
Dance.
around the
Yeah.
whole issue, and so the behavior never comes up, but the kid's not acting out, but the family has changed their lives.
Right. This is a huge problem. Yeah, I'm sorry, finish.
No, and so that's, I mean, and so, but we don't typically see those kids necessarily because they aren't referred and no one thinks to refer the family.
They aren't referred now. They will be referred to somebody later on because they haven't learned to do what's uncomfortable. They haven't learned to handle small demands. They haven't learned to handle being told no. They haven't learned to handle those things. So what we've done is we've created a bubble around this child by never exposing him to anything he doesn't like in order to maintain a family sanity, right? And that is one extreme of coercion. The parents are coerced. If you think about how we can help people to behave from one extreme to another extreme. On this extreme, we have complete concession, okay? And this is what you described. We just create a bubble around this person. He doesn't like broccoli, we'll never have broccoli on the table. You know, he can't handle a crowd, we're never going to go to church together, we're never going to the movie, you know, whatever. On and on and on, we create this bubble around this. This is complete concession. Here's where parents are in a coercion cycle, repeatedly trying to walk on eggshells, prevent those problems from ever happening. On the other end of the extreme, we have, I'm sticking with the C theme, so coercion, compliance. Well, the only goal is compliance. I don't care whether you like it or not. I don't care if it's good for you or not. I'm the adult, you're the child. You do what you say. So the child experiences that coercion. You do it or else kind of thing. Where we want to be is somewhere in the middle, cooperation, where everybody does what they do because there's something in it for them. Child follows instruction because it's fun. And after we do this thing, you know, we have a good time. That's where we want. And parents do what they do because they have fun too. So coercion is the root of both extremes of those. And I see it all the time. Yeah. Amy. Uh-huh.
And created that bubble, but they're not yet receptive to even go there. What do you recommend, how do you start that dialogue without it becoming offensive or?
Actually, Jamie's going to talk a little bit about that towards the end. It's a great question. Are there any other good questions I can deflect? Karen.
Can I do it later? How much later is later?
Okay, good. Yeah, we have to be very clear. Can I do it later? And we set a timer. Sure, 2 minutes, you know? So, and then the thing is, timers are wonderful. How many of you use timers with kids? They're great, because when the timer goes off, you go, oh, buddy, what a drag. Did you hear that? I heard that too. I hate when that happens. And it's not you, but it's the timer. But yeah, we're very, those darned technology these days. But that's a really good question. All of that, and I haven't been clear, but all of that, we have to be very, very clear that when you ask this way, this is what happens. Let's practice it during the good times so that you can better pull it up when you need it during the bad times. Yes?
I want to get back to my suicide example because, you know, I work in the REBA system.
Uh-huh.
That's something that comes my way
A lot.
quite a bit. And, you know, I recognize it happens with treatment teams, it happens with group home staff, you know, they're responsible for that person and they have to follow through with certain things if they threaten suicide. And I realize it's a chain of behaviors that takes that individual to that point. But keeping this fairly simplistic, it would seem to me that ultimately the goal is to find something that's a whole lot more fun for that individual and reinforcing for that individual than to get to, you know, go to the hospital or have the crisis team come and calm them down.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yeah.
Fair to say?
Yeah, that it should be our goal, is to help, a bigger goal is to help that person get some semblance of a quality life, right? And get treated for the depression. And if it's, okay, if it's a power struggle, then we need to give that person other skills to be effective with other people, right? I mean, I'm simplifying it. I know there is a thing called borderline personality disorder. I know that there's challenges. There's a lot. Yeah. But to help people find other ways to be effective at manipulating other people would be considered a replacement behavior for threatening suicide in order to achieve that same result, okay? So it's not always a good fit, and it's certainly not the only strategy you want to have, right? But if we're not actively teaching people other ways to get their needs met, without judging them for why they have those needs in the first place, but the fact that they've demonstrated this need for the last 20 years, they're not likely to give it up now, so let's get smart here and let's give her another way to get her needs met. Let's give her another way to visit the hospital. Maybe she could be a volunteer there and she could, you know, hang out and say hi to the nurses and all that sort of stuff for an hour a week. You know, let's find other ways to help her do that. Uh-huh. Yes.
So another person where the can I do it later is rubbing me a little bit of
Uh-huh.
the wrong way because what if that's not an option? Like they're getting on the van and the individual has to get on the van in order to get everyone to program on time. I mean, these
Right.
are realistic situations. What else can we put in that bubble to where it's a negotiating practice to avoid the kicking and hitting and all that stuff? Is there anything else we can put in that bubble?
Yeah, there's some things. I mean, first of all, we have to be honest and say, you know what, this is a time when asking for later isn't going to work, right? So that they know that in advance. And can I do it later just isn't going to work. So what would you normally do? Would you just stand there and wait for the person to get on the bus? Would you have the bus go on and leave them? And, you know, what would you normally do? But asking for something, think about, okay, the best example I can think of, the one I'm most familiar with, the guy who wants more computer time, right? If he gives up the computer willingly, he banks more time later at the end of the day. If he asks for more time now, he gets a short amount of time now, but not as much as later, okay? So that's another way to balance. We take the reinforcer for the problem behavior, the reinforcer for the replacement behavior. Could we use that to actually reinforce the preferred behavior up at the top? Yeah.
The other thing, to think about is when they're doing the needy and the problem behavior, they're getting that anyways. So if they're not getting on the van anyways, what's the problem with them saying, I want to stay home today? Either way, they're not going to school, but in one way they're being appropriately to not go to school, and the other way they're being inappropriately to not go to school. So if the end result for the problem behavior is going to be not going to school anyways,
Right. It might as well be on your terms rather than the child's terms. I mean, that you allow it to happen because if it's going to happen anyway, that's, yeah.
I have a question about in E when it's like what you can do to stop behaviors like negotiating
Way
and
behind.
compromising. How would you explain the I just forgot the terminology for the replacement behavior
Uh-huh.
in a way that I could help someone understand that that is not negotiating or compromising? Like
So the reaction of the parents is to negotiate and compromise with, well, the child is negotiating. The parents, as a response, compromise, right?
I'm not sure.
No, you're saying the parents view the replacement behavior as negotiating or compromising?
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing. Right.
Oh, okay. Do you like what's going on now? Are you happy with what's going on now? What do you think the child is getting out of that? That's where we go back to E, F, and G.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. How is a parent negotiating or compromising in E different than the replacement behavior, which is a negotiation or a compromise?
Oh, I see. Okay. So okay, that's a good point. The behavior itself is the same thing that I used as an example for, okay. So and that would be which bullet under F?
E, negotiating and compromising
Right.
on the parent's behalf, then how would I explain to a parent how that's different than the replacement behavior, which might sound exactly like the parent negotiating?
Yeah. Well, you work with the parents to say, listen, is there a way that he could ask you that you would find acceptable?
So it's more about the child initiating the asking versus the parent saying, oh, do you want to do this or that?
Yeah, but the parent may still have to prompt him, okay? So if there's a specific way that mom is not going to listen to the negotiation with whining or anything like that, but is there a way that he could ask, say, Mom, this is one of those times, okay? Are you listening? This is one of those times. Oh, okay, you have my full attention, right? Is there a way that the parent would accept another form of negotiation that doesn't make the hair on the back of her neck stand up and just rub her the wrong way? It's still a negotiation if you want to, but we're saying teach him a more acceptable way to get his needs met where he's not whining or whatever. And it depends on what the negotiation is under F here. F just gets at, is the negotiation to gain something or keep something, or is the negotiation to avoid or stop something? That's all F is really about. Becky?
well, I think also the negotiating in E is in response to a problem behavior. So the parent negotiates in response to the kid kicking and screaming, whereas G, which is the replacement behavior, is teaching the kid to negotiate instead of kicking or screaming.
Yes, that's exactly right. Does that help?
Teaching the kid an appropriate behavior, and the other one is the parent, oh my gosh, stop doing this, to get the kid to stop. So one's a consequence of the kid's problem behavior, whereas the other one is the kid's appropriate behavior.
Does that help, Krista?
It does.
Okay.
It's just tricky as like a second language or vocabulary for someone who doesn't have a behavioral background.
That's what I was afraid of.
Translate it into something a parent who doesn't have any background.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, words seem very similar.
Well, if this doesn't work with you guys, then we got to start over again. You know, that's what I was hoping to get out of this, was this kind of feedback. Yes?
I was thinking that it's really about changing what you want, because if the parent's goal is that hey, you fix up his toys while I'm watching TV, then it's not going to work. So you have to change the parent's goal to that he's going to learn how to do something on his own. You know what I mean? Because if the parent starts to help him, then the parent's goal isn't really met.
Well, in the long run, the parent's goal could easily be met if, instead of fighting and negotiating for a long period of time and then the parent doing it anyway, if the parent starts by helping him be successful, she puts one away, he puts one away, she puts one away, he puts two away, she puts one away, he puts three away. You see, and pretty soon, it's him doing it. There's,
Maybe Jamie will talk more about how to reframe that for parents, you know, and maybe getting them motivated to think of this as not just he's got to put his toys away, but he's going to learn something new that can help him do that.
Well, and maybe it's because the term negotiation has been in a couple of places, but for the, it's really, isn't it like an alternative or an intermediate step that's discreet, you know, because you wouldn't want families to come up with all kinds of
right.
alternatives, because then you end up in the same situation. But it is sort of, it's an alternative.
It's a short, it's a strategy. It's part of a bigger piece, but it's a short, quick, easy strategy that helps both the child get his needs met and the parent get his or her needs met.
And so maybe the negotiating part is what's
That could be.
confusing there, because otherwise
That could be. One more.
The other way to maybe reframe it for
What?
parents is that if the parent is engaged in negotiation, that's an appropriate skill, right? So parents think that their own behavior is appropriate. So we want to teach our kids that appropriate skill as well. Like when the kid starts hitting and screaming and the parent doesn't hit and scream back, they negotiate.
Right.
So that is effective for them, and that behavior, that's an appropriate society accepted skill to negotiate. So let's teach our kids that same appropriate society accepted
Exactly.
skill.
Right. This is how you ask. If you want something, this is how you can ask for it. You won't always get it, but you're going to be more likely to get it if you ask this way than if you hurt people. That's exactly the message. I've just been informed that we are way over time, and so I'm going to shut up and let Jamie finish up here.
go ahead and do that, and then I'll see what you.
Well, here's what I want you to understand. The last two, are I and J, these boxes here, relate to what can you do as the caregiver, what would the parent do during the problem behavior. The last set of boxes was, which was H, was what can you do to reinforce preferred behavior before the problem behavior. This is what can you do during the problem behavior to remind the child that they have another way to get their needs met. They have another way to ask for it. They have another way. How could you do that? Some people use a visual cue. Somebody just shrug their shoulders, hand them the card, make the break sign, ask them to make the help sign. How will you remind the person that they have another way to ask? And then the last, or the next one is, what will you do immediately after the replacement behavior to reinforce it, to make sure that it happens? And so this ties you back into CG above and CF above. Okay, so the things that you've done earlier, that you filled in earlier, relate directly to these boxes. No, we're not done. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I got to give Jamie your time, and I'm sorry I spent.
That's okay, because what, as Dan and I have talked, one of the things that we, and as a social worker in the program that I work with, I work with people with behaviors, and so Dan and I talk about that. But then in my program, I also work with speech therapists and physical therapists, and I have seen many very experienced, knowledgeable people travel out and try to provide support based on researched knowledge to families to help them make changes. Sometimes that works. Sometimes families just get it and hit the ground running. Enough times it happens that that doesn't work. And when you think about how complicated this information has been for us, that we have questions for Dan, and we're all relatively well educated with experience. One of the things we've talked a bit about, there's evidence-based practice, there's professional judgment, and then we take a look at the context, the family's values, where the family's at. We say that, but in real life, most of us don't have a lot of training with meeting the family right where they are and helping them to decide, are they ready to make a change? And in a case like this, this would be a pretty big change. This could be a lifestyle change to begin to interact differently with their child with challenging behavior. Luckily, it turns out back in 1983, there was something called motivational interviewing that was developed for problem drinkers. There's been decades of research on this motivational interviewing. It's been found to be very effective. It's been found to be effective in other areas besides problem drinking, and it's been found to be effective with changing parent behaviors related to children's challenging behavior. So it takes it from just giving the knowledge, thinking if we go out to a family with this tool, there's a step before just asking them to implement it. And that step is helping the family to explore their feelings about how ready are they to make a change. And not just a tiny change, but something that could be pretty profound. And if you think, a number of us in this room have probably tried to lose weight, eat more healthy, exercise more, knowing that there's evidence that those things help, we still, many of us, do not do that. Families are no different than we are. That mom that I talked about that showed a picture of Chuckie, I'm gonna bet that I heard some gasps when I said that, and it's easy to feel judgmental to a parent that does something like that. I was appalled at the time, I have to say. That parent, I know, loves her child and wants her child to behave better. But she was not ready to implement, to follow through on something like this. She needed first to have it within a relationship with the person, which was me, that was helping her to make changes. She first needed to feel that I was listening to her and her frustrations. She needed to know that I heard her, and we had to discuss what small parts she had some interest in beginning to change. So the relationship, we say we're non-judgmental. I don't know whether that mom picked up or not, that my eyes probably got wide when she did that. We need to look at ourselves closely. Okay, so motivational interviewing. Today, all we're trying to do is let you know this tool that Dan has talked about has a lot of potential. It gives a lot of information to those of us that are not behavior therapists, but it's not sufficient. We've got to also recognize that we need help in helping the family to move in that direction, to be motivated to try something hard and to be ready to support them. That's as important as this tool. This tool is not sufficient. We've got to help the family be ready to use it. The nice thing about motivational interviewing is it's a philosophy, but it's also, there are a series of techniques that have been found to be extremely helpful in moving families from contemplating making a change to preparing to make a behavior change to actually planning and then to taking some action on that. I can tell you from personal experience, I had a dietitian that used motivational interviewing on me, and I thought, I recognize what you're doing. Just cut right to the chase, to the action part. Give me some ideas about how I can change my diet, that's all I want. She refused to do that. She insisted I go through the earlier stages. I've had 2 months of eating healthy, exercising for the first time in my life, and darned if I'm not thinking it's because she made me take ownership. And that's what we have to help families to do. And she did it in such a non-judgmental way. She just supported me as I moved towards making that change. And we need to think about what we ourselves, our relationship with that family, and how we're supporting them to move towards a change that will not be easy, and be ready to be there to support them along the way. These are just some ideas. These are techniques that are well researched, found to be effective with motivational interviewing. They kind of speak for themselves. Today, this is not about how to do motivational interviewing, but there is so much out there about this, and there is more and more recognition that we are selling families short if we think providing knowledge is enough, because there's the context that the family is in. And many of us, the families we work with, are not upper middle class. They have, some of them, life is about survival. And so when we think of introducing something pretty complex that will be an additional stressor that won't be successful instantly, we need to be ready to be a non-judgmental support for them. Go ahead, Dan. Finish her up.
Well, thank you all for sticking around. And if anybody uses this in some form or another, please email Jamie and I. Let us know how you're using it, if it's helpful, etc. If you email us, someone from the NSA will get back to you, I'm sure. Thank you all very much.